I started hearing some racial remarks like, let the nigger out, we want the nigger.
Co-worker and fellow rugby teammate Eamon Merchant says they were forced to fight when 3 in the Skinhead group jumped on one of the white rugby players. Police were not able to arrest anyone for Brooks' stabbing because he did not see who stabbed him. Brooks' case was the 4th reported incident of an assault in Dallas during last year involving suspects linked to the Skinhead group. Skinheads are known for their dress, a shaved head or short haircut, t-shirt and white suspenders worn off the shoulders, maybe a flight jacket with army green fatigues and steel-toe boots. They could in some ways be mistaken for punk rockers, but police intelligence investigators say skinheads have very definite racist attitudes.
They are really the real right-wing extremists. They profess a hatred for the Jews, minorities, homosexuals, and like I say, as they followers of the neo-Nazi movement.
Investigator Foster says most of the local skinheads who have been identified come from middle or upper middle class white families. Police say it's not a tightly organized group, no more than about 20 young people in their late teens or early 20s, whose only real hangout spot is the Deep Ellum area, where some of the buildings are littered with their slogans.
It's a very strong indication that racism has never been subdued to the point of extinction.
They blasted the anti-Jewish messages off the building today, words of hate painted on the brick outside the Baruch Hashem synagogue, an ugly sign of what police say is a growing anti-Semitic movement in Dallas, led by white supremacists, skinheads.
I suppose that they're going to try and come after us again, but, that's life. We'll take what comes. We're praying.
Praying for the elderly woman, a member of this Jewish synagogue who was threatened on the phone last night by an anonymous caller.
We've been watching you. We know that you go to Baruch Hashem. You better stop.
Police don't believe there's any connection between that call and the graffiti, but members of this synagogue are on guard. The issue doesn't stop with the removal of graffiti. Rabbi Waldman intends to use his experience to generate awareness among other Dallas Jewish and Christian leaders about the growing anti-Semitic movement in this city.
I want to see if I can stimulate some dialogue in the community. I want to keep this thing alive.
Rabbi Waldman is heartened by the outpouring of community support his synagogue is receiving. 2 Dallas contractors are donating the time and materials needed for the cleanup, a job that would have cost the synagogue more than $2,000.
We want to donate this completely anonymously. They're doing this out of from their hearts.
An act of kindness that's erasing evil phrases, but the hate behind the message remains, and there's fear that the messengers will act again.
They do their damage late at night, painting anti-Semitic, white supremacist phrases and symbols on property that is not theirs, bringing out guns when paint is not enough. In North Dallas, they struck 3 times this weekend, kicking in the front doors of this temple and then shooting out several windows.
We are simply not going to allow these maniacs and vandals and hooligans to distort us or to take us away from the mission that we're here to perform.
Congregation members at this Jewish center just a few miles away are just as committed to carrying on. Already the slogans have been painted over. Security has been added. In Richardson, at this Islamic mosque, members cannot pay for extra security, cannot understand why they must be targets of such hatred.
And we are deeply concerned this shouldn't happen, at least not in the United States, where we have the religious freedom.
White power! White power!
Suspected in the weekend incidents and 7 other similar attacks in the last year are members of the Skinheads, a neo-Nazi group seen here scuffling with police at a downtown Dallas rally.
Millions and millions of people died because of the Nazi movement, and the Skinheads have bought into it lock, stock, and barrel. And they have the same hatred, and they're spewing the same venom.
It will take a few days' work and a few $1,000s to completely repair the damage done this weekend. Congregation leaders can handle that. But they worry about how long the fear and anger felt by congregation members will last.
85 black protesters took up signs in a relatively quiet march against Grand Prairie schools. An NAACP official acknowledges Grand Prairie wasn't the only district with classes in session today.
We've asked informally for the last 3 years to have the day, so then, we're more concerned about what's happening in Grand Prairie.
Just before today's protest ended, a group of young white men showed up carrying the Confederate flag. They identified themselves as skinheads.
There had been talk that a radical group might show up at the protest. After all, someone said, this is Grand Prairie, a city that seems to have an image problem when it comes to race relations. One resident told us his hometown isn't racist. Furthermore, he doesn't think Martin Luther King deserves a holiday.
This guy here is supposed to be a preacher. Or are we going to celebrate every preacher in the States?
That's an opinion echoed by the more radical skinheads.
There's not a Robert E. Lee holiday. We don't get off for George Washington's birthday or Lincoln's birthday.
White power!
That it is a crying shame that we have the Ku Klux Klan still waving the Confederate flag.
That flag has been associated with Grand Prairie before, when there was a controversy about its use at high school football games. One Grand Prairie resident who doesn't want his name used says those who say his city is racist are right. And he goes a step beyond that.
It is all of Dallas County is racist.
The number of Klansmen in this country is dwindling. Officials say a major reason is the passing of anti-mask statutes, which have stripped KKK members of their hoods and their anonymity. However, even though their numbers have decreased, the activities of the Klan have increased, and their means of getting across their messages are becoming more sophisticated. For example, former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke just won a seat in the Louisiana legislature.
What David Duke's election does, is, as far as having been successful, is to say, first of all, to the white supremacist movement, that this is a significant victory. Secondly, it says that there may be other places where politics can be an effective tool.
The first union of the Klan and the Skinheads, a young neo-Nazi group, took place in Dallas just last year. This is another change in anti-minority groups. They're picking up skinheads to pad their membership and to use as frontline warriors.
Skinheads have been known to use guns, knives, baseball bats, and their trademark, their own heavy steel-toed boots, as weapons.
Klan's Watch is an organization which monitors all racial incidents, from anti-Semitic vandalism to cross burnings to murder. And then it uses the courts to fight against racism. The organization's officials are hoping that the people of Louisiana, and especially the fellow legislators of David Duke, will help them keep an eye on him. Marion Connor, Channel 5 News.
The Assistant U.S. Attorney General came here from Washington to announce the indictments.
President Bush and Attorney General Thornburg have made clear that these prosecutions of this type rank right up there with the war on drugs as a federal law enforcement priority.
The indictments are against Sean Christian Tarrant, Daniel Alvis Wood, Christopher Barry Greer, John Lance Jordan, and Michael Lewis Lawrence. John Jordan and Michael Lawrence are fugitives. The other three are already in jail. Christopher Greer was arrested just this morning in Irving. Authorities say the group is responsible for defacing Jewish temples and for terrorizing Hispanics and African Americans in Dallas's Robert E. Lee Park last summer and last fall.
Because the defendants believed the park to be a symbol of white supremacy.
Federal and local authorities say they united to investigate local skinheads after January of this year when Daniel Wood was convicted of defacing Jewish temples. A Jewish activist says the indictments end a reign of terror.
Where we were at the point where people were asking, was it safe to go to services? You know, tonight begins the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah. So I think it's a new beginning in the Jewish New Year, and hopefully this is a new beginning in this community.
White power!
For the first time, the Justice Department is bringing the government's considerable muscle into the fray with skinheads. In federal court tomorrow, skinheads Sean Tarrant, Daniel Wood, Michael Lawrence, John Jordan, and Christopher Greer stand trial for violating civil rights. They were indicted last September. The five are charged with painting slurs and threats on synagogues and with chasing minorities out of Dallas's Robert E. Lee Park. Federal authorities want this trial to be a deterrent for other hate group members nationwide. The question is, will it?
I don't think this trial will deter skinheads from doing what they do.
The head of SMU's sociology department says the notoriety the trial will bring is just what the skinheads want.
First of all, they want to create chaos. They want to be known as a badass. They want to be seen as evil.
But Jewish community leaders say if the skinheads get stiff prison sentences, make no mistake, the trial will serve as a deterrent.
You know, you're an 18-year-old kid or a 19-year-old kid, and what happens if you get sentenced to 20, 25 years in federal prison? I would think that would be a significant deterrent.
Those in the Jewish community who were terrorized by these acts of vandalism are expected to pack the courtroom during the trial. Some are calling the court action a major victory. But Jewish community leaders say having the skinheads brought to trial is only half the victory. They say they'll claim a full victory if the skinheads are convicted. Jury selection begins tomorrow. Day one of the trial against 5 members of a skinhead faction known as Confederate Hammerskins was taken up by pretrial motions in the morning and jury selection in the afternoon. Judge Barefoot Sanders questioned some 50 prospective jurors en masse. Then he cleared the courtroom so he could individually question some of them who said they'd have various problems with being on the panel. After talking to one prospective juror, an African-American woman, he asked, "Are you saying you couldn't be fair and impartial?" The woman answered, "No, sir, I don't see how I could be." On trial are 5 men ages 19 to 25. They are charged with vandalizing synagogues and chasing and beating minorities in Dallas's Robert E. Lee Park. This is the first time the government has ever indicted and tried skinheads. At the time of the indictments, the government said they wanted this case to be a deterrent to other hate group members nationwide. During today's proceeding, the defendants, Christopher Greer, Sean Tarrant, Michael Lawrence, Daniel Wood, and John Jordan, sat facing prospective jurors. Occasionally, they laughed and talked with each other and seemed to remark on their new grown-out hairstyles. One of the defense attorneys is Leon Carter, an African-American man. One of the observing defense attorneys is Alan Greenspan, a Jewish man. Neither would comment about the irony of their involvement in this trial. In fact, none of the attorneys would talk, including prosecutors. They say they'd rather wait until the trial is over. That's expected to be about 2 weeks from now. In Dallas,
it's been almost a year and a half since one Jewish congregation found anti-Semitic hate slogans spray-painted on their temple, and minorities in Dallas's Robert E. Lee Park reported being chased by a group with shaved heads, yelling chants like "Nigger, nigger, get out of our park." Federal prosecutors say 5 defendants, members of the white supremacy group Confederate Hammerskins, were linked to those incidents, and that arrests near the group's Garland Safe House helped break the case. "Terror is just a word until you've experienced it," said the federal prosecutor as she told the all-white jury of how skinheads patrolled Robert E. Lee Park to rid it of minorities, and of how the supremacists talked of putting deadly cyanide gas into the Jewish temple's air system. "It made me sick to my stomach," said one temple member who said he discovered the air system vandalized. One African-American recounted how he ran for his life when skinheads confronted him at the park. During the next 2 weeks, some 100 witnesses will arrive here at the federal courthouse to give testimony in this case. And both sides seem to agree that some of the most important information will come from so-called skinheads, who have either had their charges reduced or dropped in exchange for their testimony. One of the ex-skinheads, 18-year-old Gordon Buchanan of Fort Worth, told the court that group leader Sean Tarrant had kicked an African-American man in the head in the park. He admits to also assaulting minorities. Defense attorneys argue the skinheads turned witnesses are the real criminals and have no credibility. An African-American defense attorney for John Jordan reminded, however, that the trial isn't about the skinhead beliefs, but about their actions. At Lee Park in Dallas, a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee stands as a reminder of the Civil War, and according to federal witnesses, it became a symbol of white power for local skinheads. Federal prosecutors say that it was here in the summer of 1988 that a band of skinheads went on so-called patrols. Federal witnesses have testified that the skinheads didn't like minority plans to rename the park, so the skinheads came here to harass and to assault minorities. African-American Felix Sherrard today recalled fleeing with fear from skinheads who chased him out of Lee Park. And as the jury listened, Dallas Police Corporal D.K. Lowe testified that the Lee Park patrolling brought her face-to-face with skinheads who said, "We're just out here chasing niggers out of the park. It's our park. It don't belong to them." Police eventually arrested one skinhead who is now testifying for prosecutors against his former white supremacist friends. Mark Briskman, regional director of the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, is monitoring testimony.
And if they can get a strong sentence, if they are convicted, that hopefully that will send a very strong, clear message to groups such as these that the United States government and all decent people are not going to tolerate this kind of action.
Briskman says he was surprised by earlier testimony that some skinheads planned to put lethal gas in the Temple Shalom air system. The director of a school at the temple today remarked on seeing racist graffiti on the school walls by saying, "I felt physically ill about it, and it worried me to have the children see it." For 4.5 days, the government presented evidence against the 5 white supremacists, witnesses who linked defendants to talk of putting lethal gas in a Jewish temple air system. to vandalism of Jewish property, to harassment and assault on minorities. Today at the federal courthouse, it was the defendants' turn to present their evidence. All 5 of them did that in less than 3 hours, and none of those accused took the stand in his own defense. But the all-white jury did hear from the mother of 19-year-old John Lance Jordan of Garland. In a quiet voice, she testified that Lance was somewhat of a loner. He had a need for friendship and companionship, she said. She added that Jordan dropped out of high school in 1987 and joined the Confederate Hammerskins after he, quote, was attacked by a group of black teenagers who injured him. Liz Sherry, the common-law wife of defendant Sean Tarrant, also testified, saying she and her husband helped start the Confederate Hammerskins, quote, a white supremacist group that wanted to unify other skinhead groups around the country. During Sherry's testimony, prosecutors introduced a 1988 Halloween photo showing a tombstone. On it was written the name of Mark Briskman, regional director for the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, and the words, died 1988. In closing arguments tomorrow, prosecutors will no doubt point to evidence like that in an effort to prove conspiracy, to show defendants plan to break the law. While defense attorneys do not deny their client's racist philosophy, they will try to convince jurors the young white supremacist never plotted against minorities and Jews.
I'm glad that I lived to see this.
With tears in his eyes, the survivor of a Nazi war camp said he hopes this verdict sends a message nationwide.
I would like to show these 5 people my tattoo of Auschwitz. And maybe they would change their mind and take their tattoo of the SS off.
For prosecutor Barry Kowalski, who pleaded dramatically for conviction, the victory was celebrated with rival nonviolent skinheads. The Anti-Defamation League said this:
that this kind of organized hate and bigotry and racism and anti-Semitism will simply not be treated in anything but an aggressive manner.
But attorneys appointed to defend the skinheads say they were surprised the jurors decided the case so quickly, and several wondered if jurors considered philosophy instead of law.
We think that the fact that they were skinheads, that they were people who had philosophies that are not popular, affected the verdict.
It is neon and flashing lights, plenty to drink, and lots of good food. It is Deep Ellum, an area with an artsy image, a spot where skinheads seem to congregate on weekends. Officer Chris Hackbarth works night shift out here, says skinheads used to be big trouble out here, says not anymore.
I think this trial and the subsequent publicity has done a lot of good to get them out of here.
The bad boys may be gone, but their image seems to keep a lot of folks away from Deep Ellum, afraid they would get beat up or robbed. The McGee family always avoided this area.
It's to where it's intimidating for you to come down here and to feel safe.
In time, business owners believe the skinhead image will no longer exist out here because, for the most part, skinheads no longer exist.
Last year, there was a problem with the skinheads. The police did a very good job of getting rid of them, and we really haven't seen them around this year at all.
The federal courthouse for over a week, attorney Leon Carter proclaimed the innocence of John Lance Jordan, an African-American lawyer defending the rights of a white supremacist, now convicted of conspiring to chase and harass other African-Americans in a park.
I'd have people pointing at me, doing this, doing that, and only then would I realize that I'm representing someone who allegedly hates my guts.
Carter still remembers the first time he met 19-year-old Jordan.
The first 10 seconds, I think we just looked at each other, and he was silent, and I was silent. And after that brief moment, it was about the business at hand.
And ugly business it was. During the trial of Jordan and 4 others, Carter listened as witnesses told how minorities were beaten, their property vandalized, their humanity degraded.
There were a lot of nasty words that were said in court, words like nigger. What did that do to you when you heard those words mentioned? Didn't you bristle just a little bit?
I don't bristle because I don't consider myself a coon or a nigger or a monkey or whatever they described African Americans as. And secondly, you have to remember where those statements came from. Most of the kids that were on trial, or teenagers that were on trial, the evidence showed came from broken homes. They were high school dropouts.
Carter says he might have begged off the case. Rumor has it other lawyers did. No one wants to be known as a skinhead's attorney. Carter tells others what he told his 10-year-old son.
I became an attorney to protect the rights of people just like John Lance Jordan, to protect the rights of people who are in the minority, as I am.
Sometimes, says Carter, doing the right thing isn't the popular thing.
Hatred like this. Marty Cohen will do his best to erase it.
Since I saw this yesterday, I've been wanting to do this, just to cover it up and sort of make it go away.
Just 2 years ago, at this Dallas temple and another, hate had also taken the form of black paint. 5 white supremacists, so-called skinheads, were brought to trial this spring, found guilty, and sent to prison. This time, investigators aren't sure if an organized group is responsible. A little girl's hunch is a possibility.
Maybe just some kids out late at night that don't have anything to do.
Whoever is responsible, the desecration forces many Jews to recall horrifying stories from generations past.
My great-grandfather was killed in front of my grandfather's eyes when my grandfather was but a boy of 12.
Now another little boy is left to wonder.
Why would somebody do that? I mean, just because we believe in God.
That belief unshaken, the Sabbath was celebrated with its usual blend of music and prayer. Inside they worshiped, but outside there was work to do.
Although this will be sealed and repainted and by dark tonight, there'll be no evidence on the wall that it was ever here. I think the evidence in our hearts will always be there.
Look closely. This is Tom Metzger, the man authorities say is behind the white supremacist movement in America. The man ordered to pay $5 million to an Oregon family for allegedly teaching skinheads how to commit serious acts of violence against minorities.
The people that do this are sick. You react with madness, with frustration, with sadness that we have people that promote violence against any particular racial group.
Sources say Metzger's influence reaches into Texas with groups of skinheads and a phone message service promoted in cities across North Texas, delivered by a group calling itself the White Aryan Resistance. The message changes every week. This time, it's aimed at the Dallas Police Department.
Once again, the Dallas Police Department promises the hirings of more non-white cops to their gang. And the next time you are raped or assaulted, do not expect Matt Dillon or Arnold Schwarzenegger to come to your rescue. But thanks to racial quotas, you can expect Pancha Villa or Buckwheat to try to track down your vicious attacker. Think about it, Whitey.
Hundreds of Dallas police officers have heard the message, and all of them, black and white, are shocked by its intent and angered that it can remain accessible to the public. The phone company has made intensive efforts to have it removed, but can't.
Oh, we deplore a message of this type all the way. It does no good to the community. It serves no public purpose. It only antagonizes racism.
Added racism at a time that police, political, and business officials say Dallas may not be able to handle it. Brace yourself for what you are about to see. Some may find it offensive, shocking, even frightening. It's a racial attack police call brutal, an attack directed at Joyce Bailiff.
But the facts are staring me right in the face. It does happen. And I've never experienced anything like this before until I moved to Dallas.
North Texas has had its share of racial problems. A large group of skinheads, a neo-Nazi group, was convicted here last year in federal court for threats against Jews and for painting racial slurs on synagogues.
They had written it right in this area. It was written in yellow paint.
This time the attacks come against one woman. 3 separate incidents in 3 months. Now the woman is mad.
I just basically feel angry knowing that someone is trying to dictate to me where I can live. I feel that if it is someone over in this complex and they choose not or doesn't want to live near an African American, then maybe they should move.
Other folks who live here at the complex are just as angered, just as confused, just as frightened about what's going on here. What they can't seem to figure out is why one woman has been singled out.
It really makes me upset thinking that somebody that she doesn't even know or someone that's in my community is doing such a thing to her.
A question no one seems to have an answer for right now, but police and Joyce Bailiff are searching.
A synagogue is spray-painted with graffiti and anti-Jewish slogans again and again. A swastika appears on a downtown building, and white supremacist skinheads make their presence known.
In terms of a 5 or 8 year perspective, is it an increasing problem? The answer is yes.
Civil rights groups are becoming increasingly worried nowadays that kids are being drawn into white supremacist neo-Nazi organizations. They say it's lucky there haven't been more tragedies.
And over the last several years in our area, some people have been so severely beaten that it's really an aspect of good fortune and luck that these people didn't die.
Last year in Dallas, 5 members of the Confederate Hammerskins were convicted of civil rights violations and are still in jail.
After that trial, the Dallas Police Department began getting serious about identifying and reporting hate crimes. And so far this year, 25 such incidents have been reported on city streets.
The supremacist prejudice is divided equally against those of different races, religions, sexual preferences, and ethnic groups.
So definitely they are dangerous.
Police say most of the incidents have been minor, but that violence lurks behind the tattoos and haircuts.
And then there's the other ones. There are the ones that I'm convinced are hardcore racist skinheads and probably will be that way on into their adult life.
Law enforcement is being aggressive, and that's clearly the long-term answer.
But the worry is that in the short term, violence might be the rule.
It's just hard to day-to-day type thing. I've learned to live with it and move on.
It happened on this Oaklawn street near Sam Houston School. 2 gay men made victims. Shots fired into their car. 1 is killed.
And when I heard the gun, I pulled him into my lap. I didn't know he'd been hit. And the second one got him in the back.
When it happened a year ago, police suspected robbery as the motive, but Andy Steingasser believed it was more, a crime of hate by people who thought the men were easy prey.
Follow your instruction sheets, the silent march. If you're heckled at, don't heckle back.
In Houston, a march protesting a gay bashing that ended with a man's death. In Arlington, another murder, an African-American shot dead in June, allegedly by teenagers believed to have ties to the Skinheads white supremacist group.
They want to feel powerful. They want to feel in control of something else and somebody else. So hurting someone temporarily restores that sense of power.
Arlington is investigating 23 hate crimes through June, Dallas checking 28 in the past few months. Fort Worth figures were unavailable. The acts included swastikas and cross burnings. Dr. Albritton said the economy, boredom, loneliness, and a lack of direction for those committing these acts get the blame. But the pastor of Metropolitan Community Church of Dallas, a church with a predominantly gay congregation, found that the violence has another connection.
People just have this irrational phobia about people who are different.
When that fear and anger have mixed, it's become a deadly combination.
In a home just north of Garland, flags demanding white supremacy drape the walls. They belong to a man who wants us to mask his identity.
What we strive for is to secure the existence of our people and a future for white children.
Some members of his Dallas chapter of the Confederate Hammer Skinheads are now in federal prison for civil rights violations against blacks and Jews. Police say most participants of hate-related activities are members of gangs who leave their calling cards across North Texas. They're also skinheads or neo-Nazis. And as one cop said, they're also just plain old bigots.
United we stand, divided we fall!
But to many of those people, Monday's Supreme Court ruling makes sense that a ban on cross-burning and other expressions of racial bias violates free speech. Many police think it's a bad decision.
Those types of divisive things that really cause terrorism in any group of individuals have no place in our society.
The High Court's decision also appalls Gwen Minner.
I don't think they should do it in any public place or on anybody's private property.
This pregnant South Arlington resident and her husband, who works at GM, know firsthand victims recently of what police call several hate-related crimes at their home.
It's a shame that you can't feel safe in your own house.
Now the Minners are moving out, scared to death, she says, by people who promote racism and fear, and also, she says, by a Supreme Court which seems set on allowing it to happen.
Authorities say the implied threat may be coming from local members of the Skinheads white supremacist group. Several members of the Confederate Skinheads were convicted in Dallas in March of 1990 for conspiring to assault minorities and vandalism to Jewish property. Authorities say the tape could be part of a recruitment effort.
It's just a ploy to get like-minded people to join their organization. They're always searching for growth because there's power in numbers.
The phone message, based out of an Addison voicemail box number, immediately identifies the group with a Plano mailing address.
This is the White Workers Union, the most anti-Semitic organization ever.
The message talks about racial matters locally and then turns political.
Political update. The old US of A really picks winners. Every election now seems to be getting worse.
Moments later, the message turns threatening. This is the focus of the investigation.
I got an inside note. Hillbilly might not live long if he sucks up to Jews.
Authorities say they will first look into local members of skinhead gangs, some that are based in Plano, and then move on from there with the investigation. Federal authorities are now focusing their investigation on local members of the Skinheads white supremacist group. Several members of the Confederate Skinheads were convicted in Dallas in March of 1990 for conspiring to assault minorities and vandalism to Jewish property.
It sounds quite similar to the groups that we keep a fairly close touch with.
Investigators want to talk to members of a skinheads group using a Plano post office box and an Addison voicemail number to spread its message.
This is the White Workers Union, the most anti-Semitic organization ever.
Moments later, the message turns threatening. This is the focus of the federal investigation.
I got an inside note. Hillbilly might not live long if he sucks up to Jews.
Federal authorities say they are taking that as a serious threat against President-elect Bill Clinton.
It concerns me when you have groups that are out there that advocate some of the things that some of these hate groups advocate. It should be a concern for each and every one of us.